I do quite like that intro, Brian. I'm happy with the way that turned out.
That got me quite
Welcome
excited,
to
Steve.
yeah, that's good. Welcome to 40K by Night. This is the podcast that aims to help us all become slightly better at the game of 40K with our big stompy knights and sometimes slightly smaller stompy knights and sometimes allies, which all work into the list. Today we're focusing on the LVO with guest Brian Jones from Art of War. Let me cover off a couple of things before we dive into it, Brian, if that's all right. I wanted to mention that we have a Discord, which is free. So feel free to jump over and join the Discord. All the links will be in the show notes to the episode. We have a Patreon, and any support in the Patreon we really appreciate. As Patreons, you get discounts on the gear and the dice, and also priority when it comes to asking questions, which we'll get to at the end of the episode. We guarantee to get to the Patreon questions, and we'll do our best to get through as many of the Discord questions as we can. But there are, Brian, I'm warning you, a lot of questions today. Brian Jones went to the LVO.
I hope I have answers. I hope I do.
Yeah, well, that's why you're here. I certainly don't have answers at my level of play. Despite it saying, okay, idiot, Brian Jones was the best overall player at the LVO out of 1,000-ish, maybe a touch over 1,000 players.
Only like 600, actually.
Only how many,
this
sorry?
iteration. Only about 600 for this iteration of LVO. The new October.
Okay. Right. Okay. So slightly fewer, but still, it's still a massive tournament.
Still the biggest thing I played in the US this year.
Right. To win best overall must have felt pretty good, especially given how many practice reps you had, as we were just discussing, going into LVO.
Best overall, it felt amazing. It was a complete and absolute surprise. I figured I had no shot whatsoever. And so my best friend and I were there to watch my teammates who had made the top 8 collect their awards. And then surprisingly, I got handed my own, which was pretty exciting. So it was a great end to a really fun weekend.
And as people will now be familiar with, you took Valourstrike out of the new Imperial Knights book. There are 4 brand new detachments and then still Quest of Forge Pact if you wanted to. There've been a lot of talk about particularly Spearhead, I think, and Questoris Companions, it's fair to say, were the 2 that were garnering the most attention prior to this. So you better, and this is the most common question that's come up to date, you better give us the reason why Valourstrike.
Yeah. I think Valourstrike was garnering the most attention before our book ever even came out, as people kind of panicked a little bit over it. And I think reining in the stratagems to be a single knight is the way to go. But when I looked at the detachments and I was prepping for LVO, I knew I wanted to take a singles list. And as I went through and built different iterations, what I kind of found was that Spearhead is amazing, and I will give you a spoiler. I think it has a place in teams. It will keep any game close. But what I found was there's not an oomph in that list where I'm like, okay, if I have a go turn and I have to kill something, I don't know that I can do it without overcommitting. And there are some armies that are just actually really, really good at killing a lot of armatures. So once I was going through it with John, and he confirmed for me mathematically over and over that he would in fact split a 10-man fire dragon unit with Flagon 4 ways and consistently pick up all 4 armatures. I was like, this might not be the answer. And then for Questoris Companions, I love it. I think it's a great detachment. I think the stratagems are, frankly, everything I would want in Knights. And the detachment rule is amazing. Being able to stack the buffs and keep going, it's all there. Except for, I don't find that those strats actually add much tactical depth or ability for expression of player skill. You have a field note. You have the access to the field note pane again, which is amazing. But what you're really relying on in Questoris Companions is either the ability to make the right 4-up invulns, which I will tell you is a player skill I completely lack, or like the ability to make your field note panes, which again, I don't think I have consistently. And so that army very much depends on you either successfully that detachment depends on successfully stat checking your opponent in that you will survive the clap and you will take out everything that can kill you and you will win harder, or you don't and you die, and there's not really any other tools other than going hard at your opponent and hoping you live. And so
Yeah.
I ended up following
Sorry.
Valourstrike because with Assault and the ability to manipulate movement pretty significantly, 2 inches to movement, 2 inches to your advance roll, a reactive move, still access to rotate, I found that actually that detachment was giving me a lot more opportunities for expressions of player skill, where, because with Spearhead or Questor's Companions, more often than not, if I ran into World Leaders, I just died. Like, it's like a scythe through wheat. Like, it's just, you're gone. And with Valourstrike, I found, okay, I can at least play keep away. I have an avenue to play the game and keep it close. And so that ultimately is what landed me on wanting to take Valourstrike. As you alluded to, I will confess, I had 0 reps on the list that I took to LVO.
Yeah.
I would love to say that I had practiced really hard. I was very ready to master that. I, until the day of list submission, was planning to take a different list, construct it around with like a defender and some other tools. And I got home from Challengers Cup, and I had 2 days off before I needed to travel to Vegas. And I realized that I could either finish hobbying my defender, or I could maintain my marriage. And so I elected for option 2 and did not. I submitted a list with a Castellan. I was like, you know what? Whatever. I'm going to get it out. It'll be fun. I think it has, like, it having Assault. My longest complaint has always been movement on the Castellan, and it can't get through terrain. And so when I could advance it for whatever reason, sure, let's give it a shot. And I ended up striking gold. I think it actually had a wonderful place in the meta that existed at LVO. And in addition to that, I actually find Valourstrike truly complements that chassis and gives it an ability to shine because of Assault, and in particular because of Thunderstomp, the stratagem that exists there, because suddenly you give a Castellan 12 attacks. Yes, you're only hitting on 4s, but suddenly it can actually fight its way out of a 5-man Marine squad, and you can keep shooting because the Castellan's problem with blast weapons has always been it gets tagged, and what are you going to do? So it wound up being a great fit for the meta there, and I loved the toolkit in Valourstrike and was able to use it to squeak out 2 consecutive 1-point wins to make it into the Shadow Round.
So we'll get to later on, whether you'd make any changes and what were the big stars of the show and whether or not there were any units that didn't live up to expectations, all of that sort of thing. But take us through the list that you took. And I'm particularly interested in the Sisters package still being in there and whether or not that was because you didn't have practice reps and you wanted to take something you're familiar with, or whether you think it's essential in Valourstrike, or what some of the reasoning is behind some of the choices you made.
Yeah, for sure. So I took 3 bigs. I took an Atropos because it continues to be our best all-rounder, and it gives me a knight that has a combat threat while maintaining an invuln, so AP4 just doesn't auto-kill it.
Right.
And with the points that I had left over, I gave it the repair enhancement. I was kind of waffling on taking this or not. I'm actually really glad that I did. I find it to be fantastic, and I'll get into the synergies of why. I then took a Crusader, and it had the enhancement to give another knight stealth. And then a Castellan, which had the ability to give another knight ignores cover. That Crusader, mind you, had a rapid-fire battle cannon with its Avidra Gatling cannon, so it is what I call the DACA Crusader, just throwing orc levels of dice at a problem and hoping you solve it.
Right.
And then I took 1 Warglaive, 1 Helverin, and an Allies package, which was, like you said, a Calidus Assassin, 2 Immolators, and a sister squad that could split between the 2 Immolators so they don't auto-destroy themselves. And I took them because I found in kind of across games with the Codex, not just this list, but with the Codex, that I wasn't thrilled with the survivability of armatures when in conjunction with their reduced OC.
Right.
I was not finding that they consistently let me secure early game primary. What I want an early game asset to do is force my opponent to commit something substantial to either kill it or out OC it. And the problem was that wasn't always happening. The Immolators with the Sisters provides me access to sticky Somehow, immolators are now a higher toughness than armigers with 6-up invuln in combat and the ability to smoke, so they can actually be deceptively survivable.
Yeah.
And if my opponent kills the immolator in shooting, but without additional resources to take out the sisters, I get a free sticky on that objective in my next command phase. And that's fantastic. So
Yeah.
I found that having the higher unit count, and I guess higher model count too, paid off much more than 2 or 3 more armigers would.
The ability to strip cover,
Also
that you've already
quite
got
valuable.
on one of the, but you've already got it on one of the other bigs, and presumably you're giving that to the Battle Cannon Crusader because AP1 is pointless.
Yes.
Does this just mean that you can give it to other things as well, not just the Crusader? Or I guess the question I'm asking is, if someone doesn't have access to the Sisters package, is that an essential way to make the list work? Could you just go with stripping cover the other way?
You can
and
just
find
go with the
something else to
enhancement
use as allies?
wholeheartedly.
Right.
I found though that there were times I needed to separate my bigs. We played the entire day one of LVO was actually Hammer and Anvil, so like I'm
Right.
covering the whole and keeping them within range to buff each other actually became a challenge as I needed to go wide or combat enemies. So having the ability for targeted strip cover was helpful. Additionally, that really helps the Atropos at AP3 on the laser
Right.
because like I did have my third game. No, sorry. Round 6, it took all 3 of my big knights activating to kill a Land Raider in cover with smoke. So that,
Yeah.
well, smoke gave it cover, but I -1 to hit, and that's a problem. And I'll get into how the Castellan can still disappoint you when we talk about that. But I don't think it's necessary. I think you could certainly run that list just focusing on a lot of arbiters, and again, then you really do gain that ability to stat check. I think transparently, if we had access to kind of the variety of armatures that Chaos Knights do, I probably would do that. But
Yeah.
I just don't find that either the Warglaive or the Helverin in mass brings what I need it to, and the Sisters offer just something different. Especially that 5 girls is OC10, like that's fantastic.
And that's, if I'm hearing you right, that's the key here, right? Not the strip cover as much as the ability to have a unit that can like hide behind a wall 1 inch away and stand on the objective and force your opponent to come around and try and deal with that, and also be OC10 on the objective, which they have to deal with. Whereas the armigers, if they toe into a point to stand, toe into a building to stand on a point, just get killed. They just die.
Correct.
So
there's it requires multiple solutions for the girls, which I love. And I will say,
yeah,
the other part I won't undersell is that the emulators with the flamers do actually provide an Overwatch deterrent for Eldar, where I'm forcing them to spend battle focus tokens on no Overwatch rather than just getting to throw them at everything they want for movement, which is very important to me in forcing them to actually think about how they're burning those resources, knowing that they are currently a boogeyman in the meta.
now we're doing this as a Valourstrike deep dive, but with that logic, it seems like that package, the Sisters package, is still relevant across the other detachments as well. Is that fair to say?
I think so. I think in Spearhead it's less relevant. I do think
Yeah.
in Gate Warden it's actually arguably more vital because what the immolators and the girls give you is the ability to go and interact with objectives that are not on your defensive line. Because what you don't want to have to do in Gate Warden is be like, cool, I'm going to send a knight to hold that objective, which means it gets no detachment rule, no access to my stratagems, its enhancements don't work. That's not a great plan. So having some units that don't care about being on the line is fantastic in that detachment. And in Questor's Companions, I think it's much the same where you want to focus on big knights. Having small things to pull out your opponent's valuable pieces is an absolute must.
The other thing that people have commented on a couple of times was that, you were on the channel on Art of War, which I do want to bring up again, mentioning that Brian is a coach on Art of War. And listen, this is great having him on the podcast. But if you really want to get the benefit of this knowledge and expertise, coaching is invaluable. And that is something worth looking at through Art of War. But on the channel, you were playing Gate Warden, and there was some questions around whether or not you just didn't think it was up to it, and we've kind of covered off why Valourstrike is great, but comparing Gate Warden and Valourstrike, Was there a reason you just kind of swung away from Gate Warden? Was Valourstrike too good? What was the decision there?
Twofold. One, as I mentioned, I had not had as many reps with the Codex as I had wanted. I for my team for Challengers Cup, I pivoted to playing Votan when new rules were voted in, so I had to quickly learn some need guards so that Richard could play the AdMech that he knows and loves. And so I had not had as many games as I wanted with the Codex and Gate Warden in particular, which is one I've hit on this before, but Gate Warden is amazing in its ability to come in and adapt to whatever opponent list you're playing. The problem is that once you start the game, you can't pivot off of your plan. So if you didn't place the line right because you were like, oh, my initial plan was wrong, you're in a lot of trouble. And I did not feel confident in my knowledge of going in because I took a hefty chunk of this summer off. And so I did not feel confident that I would get every decision right through 6 rounds with where to place my line. I think if I had had infinite time, Gate Warden is probably where I would have landed. But the mobility that Valourstrike gives, at least in the current meta, is pretty enticing. I won't lie.
So speaking of plans, when you're looking at Valourstrike, and particularly the list you had, do you kind of have an overall idea of what the plan is going to be for every game, or are you waiting to see what the opponent is? I mean, the idea that you've got assault on everything, it feels like, I don't know if that means that you're waiting for a go turn or you're waiting to see what the opportunities are. But broadly speaking, what's the game plan with Valourstrike? Where do you think the advantages are?
I would love to tell you it's the same every time, but it definitely changed per opponent. And that ties into our detachment rule as well. Outside my first game, I chose my both parts because I was like, I need full control over this. I need to make sure I do it right. I don't screw it up. I found that I took reroll one, a hit roll and a wound roll for reactivation, all 7 rounds. But what I quickly discovered after round 2 is that I was completely willing to randomize the deed for that extra CP to get 3 CP when I accomplish it. And how I leveraged the assault, this ties in, how I leveraged assault with Valourstrike played into what my deed was. I played, 1, 2, 3, I ended up playing 4 out of 7 rounds into various forms of space. Well, I guess if you count chaos, but 4 rounds of regular Space Marines and 1 round of spiky Marines out of the 7. And what I actually found, so the Phobos combi weapon lieutenant is really good. My opponent would love to put him out on an expansion objective, say, cool, I'm going to reroll 1s to wound there. And this is exactly what happened in my 3rd round and 4th round, was they put their Phobos lieutenant out there, and I went, great. I wound up getting first turn, and I went, Mike Stellan advances. Cool, he's going to move into like 11.9 inches, so he's in Melta range, but I'm not going to trigger your reactive move. And I rolled kill a character, so I picked that at the start of round 1. Moved Stellan over without triggering the reactive move, Twin-Link Melta gunned him, killed him. Bottom of turn 1, I'm at 5 CP. My world is wonderful. I have all the defensive tools I want, and being able to rotate ion shields, and being able to reroll a save, and being able to use Thunderstomp to get out of fights, or to get out of combat, or threaten and interrupt with Thunderstomp, which is 3 CP, but the threat of really changes how your opponent plays and what they want to do. And then also to leverage the reactive move. Like there is not a stratagem in the Valourstrike detachment, because I even used the Lance one once, that I did not use. I find that whole suite of stratagems to be incredibly impactful and very versatile.
Yeah. Well, that was going to be my next question about the stratagems. And is there one that kind of is just an auto, gets used all the time? Is there one that you found came up constantly, or is it just all of them are always useful?
All of them are always useful. The reactive move in certain, against Marines particularly, because Marines usually they're going to have shooting and combat that they need to commit into Big Knights. And especially if they're going to try to take multiple in a turn, they have to hedge their resources. The threat of the reactive move going, cool, if you get within 9, I'm going to reactive move, which means I'm going to move off the terrain. You're not going to be able to shoot me, and that charge is going to become really hard. It ties the hands of your opponent, and they're just like, I'm not sure what to do. Maybe I don't commit to 2, and I just overcommit to 1, in which case I'm like, great, I love that. That means I'm going to for sure have another resource next turn to be able to respond. Rotate is a classic, and I think it's what lets this list function without a defender. The Thunderstomp is invaluable. You're going to use it way more than you think, like so much more than you think.
Right. Wow.
And maybe it's just because I faced a lot of Marines, but you truly are. Giving the Daka Crusader lethal hits to go with sustained if it stood still. There are very few things it will not kill, and just by drowning it in dice. And then the increased movement won me, like it's the reason I won my round 5 and the reason I won my round 6. It's an invaluable stratagem to have in your pocket when late game, I'm probably looking at just having my big knights and still needing to get secondary points. So
right.
Sorry, I jumped ahead, but your question of is the game plan the same? It's not into every list. I deployed pretty conservatively each time with the goal of not exposing any big knights other than one game, my game into Space Wolves in round 4. I looked at it and went, I don't have to respect your shooting at all. Because it was just a single like anti-vehicle shooting. So I got to deploy with line of sight. But I could deploy them conservatively, but go, hey, because my opponent would go, all right, I'm going to pre-measure everything. I'm like, hold on. With Valourstrike, that's a really hard thing to do. And they'd be like, what do you mean? I'd be like, well, I can advance the shooting. Like, okay, so add 6 inches. Like, no. I could also add 2 inches to my movement and 2 inches to my advance and potentially then shoot. And they're like, well, what does that threat range mean? I was like, let me put it this way. An Atropos could move 22 inches and still shoot.
Wow.
And your opponent goes, okay. And they like pull the tape measure back every time. And they're like, all right, maybe I change how I deploy. And that's huge. Like, just the threat of it, again, not me doing anything, but the threat that I could drastically changes how my opponents play. And that means I, the Imperial Knights player, am going to dictate the game flow.
Yeah, I love that. And that's and again, we'll get to later on just the units that were great and the units that were disappointing, whether the list stays the same. I don't know with the big knights. It sounds like you were pretty happy with most of it, most of the way through. The Crusader seems like it's great. The Castellan seems like it's great. The Atropos almost a must-have. I feel like there are a lot of great options though for Valourstrike. So now the original plan here was going to be go game by game, but I feel like we're doing a great deep dive into sort of more broad strategic ideas for different things. But
and I can hit some highlights from each game.
Yeah, if we hit some highlights and some broad, how to deal with this army kind of on the way through. So let's jump into that, the event itself, and just let's go round by round. What you faced and what happened.
So round 1, I got the Knight's Mirror, and for everyone listening, it was full on panic mode when the pairing came because I was like, oh my god, what if I lose? Like, I would love to tell you a lot of the time the Knight Mirror is a skill matchup. But sometimes the Knight Mirror is just like, which one of us rolled board 4s? Like, that could be. And so, but that was the matchup that immediately confirmed, was like, Brian, actually, you made a good choice in bringing the Castellan. Because the Castellan gives something that there's not another unit in our roster that gives, which is high AP, high damage, long range anti-vehicle shooting.
Right.
And then the Atropos, as we all know, shines in the mirror because it gives reroll against other Titanics. Now, my opponent in round 1, was his first ever tournament. I felt terrible. He was the nicest guy on the planet. And it was actually really refreshing because he was just like, hi, how long have you been playing? It's great to meet you. And I was like, this is great. We had a really, really fun time. We finished and he was like, so it seems like you probably know more about the game than me. Can you give me some advice? And I was like, happy to. But I got to go second, which is huge in the Knight Mirror because you can help dictate the flow of gameplay and you have bottom of turn scoring. But I found the Atropos and the Castellan just gave me such an advantage into his list, which was 3 bigs, having a Lancer. But the Lancer he kept being like, it can't come out. He was playing Questor's Companions. If I advance, I kept staging myself to where if he wanted to advance and charge, that was fine. But he was going to be looking at a 9 to 11 inch charge. I'm comfortable giving my opponent that because I'll go, if you want to gamble your whole game plan on that, and I've staged my Calidus, so you're not going to be able to reroll the charge. Okay. If I lose on it, I'm fine with that. Those odds are in my favor, and I'm okay with it. So I came away with that one with a win. Felt quite good. My round 2 was much closer, I would say, than the score indicated. It was a 71-46 win into Chaos Space Marines. And it was into Liam's list that won LGT. So Veterans of the Long War, leveraging Bile, and a whole lot of other stuff. And I had top of turn, which on supply drop, which for everyone at home was like, supply drop, that's the disappearing objectives, where having top of turn is terrible because your opponent's guaranteed to get a 15 on primary into the game. Managed to squeak that one out. And again, that threat of being able to advance and shoot is frankly what won me that game, because I had actually, this is stunning, but I had more resources to feed into holding my expansion or the middle than my opponent did, because I kept going, cool, I'm going to put like an immolator and sisters out there or an armature. You've got to bring like your bio unit or one of your other 2 big hammers out to take care of it. And when you do, my bigs are going to be able to advance and shoot you and kill you, but not get hit by your other hammer units. And it created a lot of problems for my opponent. He was just like, I don't have good choices here. Now, it was still wound up closer than I probably would have liked, but that also was a game where I discovered that, right, the Castellan at times can turn back into a pumpkin, where I was really smart with my CP. I rolled a 1 on the Volcano Lance. That's fine. I'm going to CP reroll it. I still rolled a 1. I missed. That's fine. I've got a hit reroll. I missed again. Okay, that's fine. I got the Plasma. I rolled 2 plus 3, so 5 shots. Cool. I missed with 1. I didn't wound with 2. So you're making 2 saves and you made 1. I've killed 1 model and I have 2 missile shots left. Oh no. What is my 400 plus point unit actually accomplishing for me? And that creates a moment of panic. And you've got to be, with this list, I'll tell anybody, you've got to know and embrace everything that is the Castellan, which is it's a casino sometimes. Sometimes you'll just pick up 2 really important units. Sometimes you will kill a Space Marine with your 400 and some odd point unit that has really high AP. And you're just like, how did this happen? But it will. But an army that wanted to get me in combat, I repeatedly found against that CSM list that I had the advantage because of how much further I could move and still shoot. And I could stage my bigs in a very safe manner away from those objectives while still ensuring their security. And that was exactly what I needed.
I feel like any unit we have is a casino, right? We have 400-point units. The Atropos sometimes.
The Daku Crusader felt great. Orc levels of dice solve a lot of problems.
That is, yeah, when you're rolling that many dice. But Canis sometimes doesn't do what you want him to do. Like every unit will have a game every now and then where it just bounces for a turn and feels bad. But the other question I have is this, just getting into the head of your opponent, is this being Valourstrike? I feel like your tape measure is a weapon here, where you get to bring it out and just constantly measure out, hey, this just reminding you psychologically, this is my range, this is how far I can go and what my threat range is with a 24 or 36-inch gun, being able to advance and shoot as well. Just letting them know. If you're there, I'll be able to get you next turn.
Or my opponent, being like, all right, well, I've got my chosen brick. Like, it's going to move. It can advance and charge. And I'm like, that's great. If you get with a 9, I can trigger a reactive move. And they're like,
right.
Am I ready to add D6 inches less to my charge? And it forces some rough decisions. Now I have said my piece about my Castellan letting me down. We're going to go into rounds now 3 through 7. And I want to preface this with, in rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, I had the Castellan with just the Volcano Lance dedicated to a target and nothing else, and in 4 of those 5 rounds with only 1 shot, top to bottom of vehicle. In my round 3, I played Tyranids, High Fleet. It did require 2 hits and wounds to do the Tyran effects, but AP 5, strip cover with my Immolator. Tyran effects has no save. They can blank 1, but I went, that's fine. It's 8 plus D6, and I reroll the damage. And if I've done any ancillary damage, it just dies. And that the answer to Tyrannofexes, which are one of the most terrifying units for any Knights player to see when they just go, yeah, it's 6 plus D6 damage, 2 shots. You either make the invul, like it results in a dead Knight or a completely healthy Knight. Like it's such a binary result. But being able to go, that's fine. If I get to shoot back, you're dead. Feels really good.
Yeah.
And the Castellan absolutely dictated the format of that game, especially with it being able to get stealth from the Crusader. And meant even when I brought it out, and then he had to move his Exocrines or his Tyrannofexes, so they're not getting the benefit of heavy. Now they're also taking a -1 to hit because of stealth. Suddenly, I feel so much more confident about being alive, and this is where the play of the enhancements came in. In addition, I should shout out in round 2, where I'm trading my armigers to try to pull out these chosen and other resources. He's got a couple of predators and is trying to chip away at them, but he does like 6 damage and doesn't kill them. Cool. I'm going to repair the armature for D3. Now you've got to shoot back through 9 wounds, not 8, or 11 wounds, not 8. And being able to just consistently hand wounds back to each Knight, I fell in love with that enhancement. There's no way I'm not taking it, especially in round 4 when I played Space Wolves and I got honored top of 1, and I just went flat 3 heal, flat 3 heal, flat 3 heal for 4 turns. So it's a whole other Knight that I got. Like 12 wounds I just handed back. That's a whole other armature. It's unreal.
Sorry, I love this because one of the big things, when a book first comes out and you have people going through the books and going through the strats, and invariably there's one, a strat or an enhancement or even a unit, which people dismiss and go, it's cute, I don't think it'll come up. That we later find out actually is really great. And this sounds like one of those, the ability to get a Knight back up above bracketed or...
The repair, getting it out of battle shock range so that you're not worried about it is huge. And just the threat of it, even because your opponent's like, all right, cool, you're gonna take a -1, it's gonna be battle shock. Well, no, not necessarily. I can repair it. And they're like, crap. All right, I've got to overcommit. Because the threat of leaving it on a few wounds is huge.
Right.
And so I quickly fell in love with that enhancement. And then as I went into my string of Marine matchups, I found that the ability to give stealth to one of my Knights, either the Atropos or the Castellan, was huge because even with Oath, rerolling hits, it's like, fine, you're hitting on 4s, not 3s.
Right.
It makes a difference when they're rerolling everything. And I think the enhancements there. Now, I tripped myself up at several points by moving myself out of range of each other and when I had to go wide. But if you can keep that triangle of bigs together, or even the Atropos can kind of go on his own and support the armatures, but you've got to be able to keep the Crusader, the Castellan together to be able to go Castellan's -1, Crusader's ignoring cover. Have a blast. It's huge. So going into day 2, we were playing Search and Destroy all of day 2, which was a concern for me because I'm not a really combat-y list. I have one Knight that could fight. That's it. So Search and Destroy is always worrisome. And so I got paired into Space Wolves round 4, which was an immediate concern because Thunderwolf Cav now on the charge are absolutely terrifying. And of course, it was Saga of the Beast Slayer, the detachment that is just custom made to kill Knights. But my opponent didn't have enough of a shooting threat to force me to kind of respect it in deployment. So I deployed with pretty open lines of fire, knowing I could advance, and I got top of 1. And that let me immediately pick up a whole Thunderwolf Cav unit, as well as a unit of Headhunters when they moved down on top of 2. And it let me he could not bring all of his resources to bear at once, which is what a Space Wolf army like that needs to do. It needs to just overwhelm you. And I was able to just say, no, I'm going to dictate the terms of the engagement. And again, that's where that assault rule came in huge into a matchup that normally my opponent would just be able to go, cool, I'm going to stage. I know I can go farther than you. Sucks to be you.
Yeah. And they again, if you've got an army that is solely focused on combat that doesn't shoot as much, did the reactive move come into play at all in that game?
It did indeed. It was the head takers come down. Great. My Castellan reactive moves off of the terrain. Oh, no.
Right.
And it just, it's great. Like it's in some ways that you feel bad at times because you don't give there's not a good decision, right? Your opponent just goes, I have A and B and they both suck. But I think I like that as a detachment where if I can set that up, I can force my opponent into that. I still have to manage my CP. I have to make sure that I've like allowed for it. I've planned for it. I don't just like waste it, because you can waste it on a reactive move that doesn't matter, and then you can't rotate or vice versa. You still have to carefully manage it, but there is such an ability for skill expression in how you use your CP.
Right. And if you're facing, and this, I guess, is where we're going to deal with archetypes rather than specific armies. But if you're facing a heavy combat army, like a Space Wolves, a World Eaters, a whatever, you get top of turn. If you're able to get an angle on their big unit that can do lots of damage, is it worth going out there to try and take care of that unit? If you get a line on some big thing that you think, okay, I can send the Atropos out and deal with this, like right now. Do you take that chance? Are you aggressive in that way?
I would love to give you a yes or no answer, but I'll say it depends. Because what you want to do, and this is where I tried to use my knights with the deployment game to force my opponent to drop those resources before I dropped. I actually wound up holding the Castellan last, usually, always, for deployment. And using the Atropos and the Crusader, which I kind of knew where they would go and they can move farther, to force my opponent to put down the other resources. So I go, all right, I'm going to hedge my bets. I'm going to put the Castellan here, like in that game, and go, if I get first turn, I could advance, touch this, and take out the Thunderwolf Cav unit, which is huge for me.
Right.
And in doing so, I can do it while still saying at most I'm getting charged by one unit. And the Castellan's still T12. Like, it's still not easy to kill. And that for me was how I found myself staging every first turn to combat armies was I will take the calculated risk and try to force him to put down his threats before I put the Castellan down, so that I could threaten to touch a piece of terrain that normally I wouldn't be able to, shoot and kill an important unit while preventing minimum clapback.
Right.
That to me was the deployment game I had to win every time.
Yeah. And okay, let's move on to so any further rounds that you played that you think it's important to touch on?
Rounds 5 and 6 were both 1 point wins. And round 5 was, I played into Death Guard. I played Junior. He and I have now played at 3 consecutive major FLG events, always in round 5 or 6. So he and I are just the gatekeepers for each other. He's playing Death Guard, Mortarians, or Hammer Mortarian, I guess is what it's called. So vehicle heavy list, I got really excited. Thinking I'm great, cool. I got bottom of turn. I'm thinking, great, I'm cruising. And he goes, well, crap, I have to just take the shots I can get because you can advance and shoot. I'm Death Guard. I'm really slow, so you're just going to pick me off. So cool, I'm gonna start pushing and just shooting with what I can turn 1. Yeah. And I'm going, great, he's played right in my hands. I'm going to pick up these pieces before the others come in from strat reserves. Life is good. And that worked turn 1, and then didn't work in turn 2, what should have been my go turn, when I rolled a 1 for, of course, the singularity cannon on the Atropos, a 2 for the number of shots on the laser. And remember, Junior's a great player, so of course made me take a -1 to, hit if I was in stinky range, which he made sure I always was, because Mortarian's Hammer lets him pick 2 knights, or 2 units, but for me, 2 knights, to always be afflicted and be stinky, which was not great. So I rolled like a 1 and a 2 on the laser, and I hit with like a whopping 1 shot, and he made the demon save, and then I rolled like a 2 on the number of shots to the Castellan for the plasma, and a 1 on the Volcano Lance. Now the Volcano Lance killed a drone, which felt great, but that was all I killed on my go turn. Like I committed all 3 big knights, and I killed a drone, and I was like, oh no, I'm in trouble.
It's not a real go turn, is it? It doesn't count as a go turn. It's a stop turn.
Junior, a true gentleman at heart, did me a solid and failed the 6-inch rerollable charge with his death shroud that came in. So we both went, oh, okay, well, we're going to have a game then. And it just became a game of scrapping by, trying to kill each other. I finished the game with a battle-shocked Atropos on the table. Bottom of 5. No, sorry. A battle-shocked Atropos and one other unit. And the other unit that was not battle shocked, I went, well, if I add 2 inches of movement to it with the stratagem, because I drew sabotage, I make it into your deployment zone. That's 6 points. I went, and that was it. The 2 CP, I could either redraw a secondary and not get one that might let me win, or I just went, cool, spend. We had a judge come over, measure it to make sure. We both want to all right, if this is the game, we want to make sure, which for everybody at home, that's the kind of thing you call a judge for. You don't want either one of you to be like, I don't know if I agree. Right. Get a judge, come over and decide it, and then you can game plan. And it was just, what a game. Can't believe it. 1 point win.
Yeah. That was amazing. And I remember I wasn't seeing anything on stream, so I was trying to keep up with your progress via BCP and just watching the scores. And when that one came, I saw Junior's name and thought, this is going to be tough.
Eventually we'll have a game, because our last game came down to 1 point as well, bottom of 5. So eventually, I'm looking forward to the game that he and I can decide in turn 2 and just go have beers for the rest of the time. I can't wait for that game.
Yeah. And so what was the next 1 point win?
Was into Blood Angels. And so that was, again, the other game that I had. You've heard me complain in the past that taking a lot of variable shot weapons, yes, it averages out over time. But if you have that turn where you just roll crap for variable shot weapons, and it's an important turn, you're in trouble. My opponent was playing a Liberator assault group. He had intercessor squad, or not an intercessor, but a Death Company Marine squad with a chaplain, and just in a Land Raider that was, I cannot let them get to me. They will butcher any big knight they touch. So I was like, great. I'm going to save the Castellan because the plasma is the best anti-marine gun I have. And with Blast, the Volcano Lance will pick up 5 Marines, hopefully. So I want to save those. So I shot my Atropos at the frickin' Land Raider that had pop smoke and did no damage. Now, my Emulator did 4 damage. Props to it, between its heavy bolter and its flamers. But I then shot the Daka Crusader at it, popped lethal, going, cool, I'm going to drown it in dice. It lived on 3 wounds. So then I had to activate the Castellan to kill it. And still, and I used a Helverin to try to take those last 3, didn't. So I used all of my activations to pop it and didn't get anything into the unit that came out. But the reactive move saved me from a charge after the unit had gotten out. And that let me kill just enough. That game, I believe, I finished with a single model on the table as well. It was the Crusader only was left on the table. He killed everything else in my army. And my Castellan killed itself because it killed the Death Company captain it was in combat with. Things I didn't know prior to this game. Death Company captains explode when they die. For mortal wounds.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So my Castellan successfully killed itself. And I realized why my opponent put his attacks into an armature and dumpstered it. I was like, what a fool. He left me with the Castellan. It's going to be fine. And he goes, no, I explode. Flat 3 mortal wounds. And I was like, and I'm dead. Well, that's unfortunate. And again, just came down to a single point throughout the game. And it came down to the turn before I had elected to take 2 points on cleanse rather than give up my shooting, rather than to take my shooting to maybe do a little bit of damage to something. And those 2 points decided the game.
I don't know how often this came up for you with Blood Angels and the other armies you face, but are you rotating Ion Shields ever? Does that come up a lot?
I used rotate a hefty amount into, if my opponents set themselves up, they're like, all right, I'm going to have a go turn to try to kill this knight. For me, it was always worth it to rotate, especially in an army again, I played 4 rounds into Codex, different variations of Marines, 2 rounds into Chaos, and only 1 round into Imperial Knights. And so Oath and Fetter's Long War and Chaos have Oath. So 5 of my opponents had Oath. And it was like, all right, well, when he declares his Oath target, I kind of know. And it was always then, I want to make sure that this can live for as long as possible. And particularly if I got to have give that knight stealth. So I'm going to force the -1. I'm going to rotate for a pretty minimum investment to try to keep it alive, because Space Marine anti-vehicle shooting is low shot count, high damage. So making swapping that 1 in vuln is huge.
sorry, if I can backtrack for a second, I'm thinking about Death Card as well, and I probably should have asked at the time. Just generally, because I feel like they come up a lot, like there are a lot of Death Guard armies around. Are there any tips broadly that you can give us for knights going into Death Guard? What's the way to deal with Death Guard?
Be excited. We have a good matchup into Death Guard. We are one of the few armies that does. They're either going to take -1 save or -1 to hit or wound, but they're wounding us mostly on 5s. With the -1 toughness, they can get that down, but like Death Shroud and a 3-man unit are not effective into killing a big knight. They're far from a guarantee. And so you often have the shooting to kill their stuff long before it kills you. And Death Guard are bad at one thing, which is moving across the board quickly. And so Valourstrike in particular let me leverage that advantage into the Death Guard matchup. So I think going into Death Guard, be excited. And I should say I was slightly glad to get Junior and then Blood Angels, because the one matchup as I got into later rounds that I was dreading was the Eldar matchup. And frankly, part of the reason that I took Valourstrike was that I realized it gave me the best chance into Eldar, only because if I paired it to Eldar, my hope was to deploy on the line and go first. Because with Assault, I could get far enough to pop the Wave Serpent and kill the Fire Dragons. And if I did that, it's a totally open game. I'm not going to win a cagey game against Eldar. It's just not going to happen. But
so that's the tactic. Line up on the line, go first with Valourstrike, advance and shoot the crap out of the vehicles.
I will caveat that. That was the strategy in day 2 when I knew I was probably playing my teammate Folger or another very, very highly skilled Eldar player.
Right.
In the earlier rounds or with someone who was maybe less familiar with Eldar but hopping onto the meta list, my hope was that I could manipulate the reactive move and other things to actually force them into a bad position and capitalize there. But against a player that I would be fairly confident won't make a movement mistake like that, my only chance is to just say, I'm on the line. We're going to risk it on the dice roll.
Right. So I'm really keen to get into the questions that people are asking. Is there anything else we need to cover off from the event before we move on to the question phase of this?
Would love to jump into it. I will just say, the last thing I'll say is, again, the detachment rule giving us the extra CP is huge for you as a knight player and leveraging all your defensive stratagems.
Actually, the one thing, and this has come up as a question, but I should have asked it anyway, and I promised I would all the way through this, is, okay, now that you've been through the event, you're looking at your next event. If you're taking Valourstrike again, what changes do you make to your list? What worked well and what didn't?
Steve, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not sure I do. I think I ran into a lot. The meta has adapted to where people want to bring long-range anti-knight shooting, which usually means no invuln. The Volcano Lance was a game changer in damn near every matchup because of what it forced my opponent to decide on. If I can't be in the open, it will just kill me. Like took a Ballastus Dread, full to dead. It took multiple Gladiator Lancers, full to dead, single shot, no save, nothing, you're dead. And that's something that we have not had, and well, we've had access to with Excelon, but I have not put into a list in a very long time, where I can just sit in my deployment zone and say, dead. I think I would just maybe make peace with the fact that variants will either win it or lose it for me on the shot count, but say, I'm going to save my CP, I'm going to triply have rerolls, I'm going to do everything I can to mitigate the risk. I genuinely really liked that list. And I thought that detachment needed to hinge on a defender, both for its ability to, its guns are good. It brings the ability to prevent you from having to rotate. But I liked the Castellan for the guns that it brought more, the higher strength, the higher AP, and then it gets rid of the conundrum I had when I had a Crusader and a Defender of which one gets ignore cover. Now, if the Defender were to come down in points, like 15 points, I'd have a rough decision, and I'd really be thinking about it.
Right. Yeah, the Defender is just very pricey.
Just
really,
a little too much.
Yeah, I feel like in Spearhead, the Defender is almost an auto-include.
Oh, yeah. That's where I feel like its cost is totally justified, because you're just like, cool, 3-1 armigers, deal with it.
Buff 3 armagers? What? Wait. So yeah, that's pretty good. All right. So going through the questions now, a lot of them are stuff we've already covered off, which is, they're asking the good questions, which is great. Brian wants to know, you're going to continue with Valourstrike, or if you were to choose one of the other detachments, which one do you think you would go with?
Valourstrike, I'm going to cheat, sorry. Valourstrike in singles, I will lobby the hell out of Nick Nadavati to let me take Spearhead into teams. And just say, but then he'll go, can you mention Eldar? And I'll say no.
Is the reason for that just because in teams you want to be able to control the amount you're going to lose? Like you've got a more like
consistency is huge. Consistency is huge in teams, and the problem that big knights have always presented is like you either make the 4-ups and win the game, or if you lose the wrong 4-ups, like you go from I predicted a 14, I got a 0, or I predicted an 8, but I made all my saves, so I got a 20. It's hard for a team to function off of that. They need that consistency and the accuracy. That the volume of armigers helps mitigate the variance of the dice.
Gotcha. Paul wants to know, do you think Imperial Knights need allies in general with the current state of the game, or can a list work just with pure stompy robots?
Yes, so I think Spearhead is evidence that it could work with just robots. I do think if you want to play any of the other detachments, you do need allies because the OC knock on armigers, it's just, they're just low enough to be a problem consistently and be a frustration that you don't want to, your big knights die so much easier without the feel no pain that you need to have pieces you can draw stuff out with.
I'm going to, for the people watching on YouTube, this is our very first YouTube content, by the way, our very first video.
Oh, that's exciting.
Video podcast. People can see me looking down. It's because I'm looking at the questions on my phone, which has a Space Wolf cover.
If people thought we ignored them, truly now they know.
Yeah, I'm promise I'm not being rude. I'm just trying to get to the questions as quickly and effectively as I can. So Scott on our Discord. That's it for our Patreon questions. The other questions were all stuff that we've already covered off in detail, like why Valourstrike and stratagem use and so on. We'll get through as many of these as we can, but we might have to save some for a special questions only episode later. Scott wants to know, can you do an explanation on how to decide which weapon profile to use? And this is, I think, a lot for newer players. You have trouble choosing between the strike or sweep profile. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not. In which profile, high intensity or low intensity for Canis Rex and so on. Is there what goes into that decision?
It's a good question because for the Atropos, right, that decision cuts two ways: shooting and in combat, and it is a constant thought. Into armies with access to AOC or a like variant, I often find the sweep with an Atropos or Canis to not be as good of an option because it effectively becomes either AP1 or AP0. It is one of the reasons that I have found I've been falling in love with running the Chainsword again, the Reaper Chainsword on my Paladin, on a Warden, things like that, because AP3 on the sweep, AP4 on the strike means there's not a good choice for your opponent. Similarly,
I had that the other day. Same sort of thing. I suddenly went, wait, AP4? I forgot that was.
Yeah,
I forgot
like,
that was.
That's kind of good, right? It feels good.
That's great.
And so if I'm like going into a Marine squad, yes, right? The more attacks at damage 2 sounds like the perfect Marine killing weapon. But then I go, they're just going to save it on 3s or 2s. Like, no, I can't. And so I go with the higher AP, especially if they don't have an invul, and I just go with for every save you fail is the dead guy, and I'm comfortable with that. And that's usually what skews me. Now, if it's a unit with a very good invuln that doesn't divide evenly into the damage of my strikes, where it's not like 1 kills it, but 2 or 3 is going to be required to, I'll look at just drowning it in the saves and saying, can you make enough 4-ups?
Sure. This is one of those things where we could probably do more of an episode where some of these questions are more in depth.
Especially in Valourstrike, because you have access to Lance, so you can make that sweep more enticing.
Right. Yeah, it's just the AP, right? If they've got an invul, fine, but if they don't, then you want to use the high AP to try and just get rid of stuff. Classless Fraud, love that name, says, now that you've had more play time with the Codex post data slate, have any of the knights surprised you? Because you did on Art of War, you had the tier list of the different units. Has anything gone up or down in that tier list now that you've played?
The Castellan brought himself up. I said I did say in that he offered something unique, but I don't think I realized how much the meta had shifted to ranged anti-tank that had no invuln. And it makes sense as I think about it, because the Atropos is a 24-inch range. It just wasn't something that people had to bank around. They just said, cool, I'm going to sit in my deployment zone and I'll shoot you to death. But then you show up with a Volcano Lance and like, oh my God, what do I do? So it made me fall back in love with it. There was a gentleman who ran Triple Knight Tyrant in the Chaos Knights list with 3 of the Valiant variants. He ran into my Space Wolf opponent in round 3. I played Space Wolves in round 4, and he picked up all 3 Tyrants in one turn. That made me go, maybe the Valiant just is like I said, just doesn't quite have a place yet.
I was going to ask about the Valiant, because I know that this is complete bias in my brain, but I just love the Valiant and don't for some reason like the Castellan as much. But and I was thinking maybe the ability to advance and shoot means the Valiant is an option, but clearly not. You still want the range, right?
Yeah.
So have you considered running the Rogue Trader Entourage unit?
Having that ability to either infiltrate or redeploy.
Yeah.
I have thought about it. Infiltrate has not yet overrode having access to sticky. Now, if I'm running Questora's Companions, damn right I'm thinking about it. Because they have access to sticky, especially if you take Canis Rex, you can just spam sticky for free all the time. That's when I really would consider the Rogue Trader.
It's an interesting question as well. What made you not want to run Canis Rex? You don't think he has a place in this, or the other 3 are just better options?
In Valourstrike, I don't love him. Now that once the stratagems were changed to only impact 1 knight, I found that I didn't want Canis. I took 2 kind of pure shooting platforms, and then I consider the Atropos almost a dedicated combat knight because he has the invuln and actually more combat than a Lancer. So I needed specified roles, and Canis didn't give me that. And when you look at the list of strats in Valourstrike, there's not one that you just go, cool, this is my auto spin with Canis every time. Like rotate, you're like, I might want to spend that on somebody else. Crap, what do I do? I think in Gate Warden, and I think in Questora's Companions, he has a home all day long. I don't think he has a home in Spearhead because he doesn't have a bondsman.
Yeah. Thoughts on the Hellburns and Suppression? Did that come up for you? Was it worthwhile, the new ability of Hellburn?
Yes, because I did run into multiple armies that had Thunderhammers or some variant of them, which means their weapon skill, right? They go to hitting on like 4s or 3s if they were an elite infantry unit. And then I went, great. So I just want you to know, if my Helverin shoots you, that means when you get to combat, you're going to be hitting on 5s.
Yeah.
And hitting on 5s with Oath just doesn't sound nearly as enticing. And so it was interesting. It played into some opponent psychology as far as what targets they prioritized, because they didn't feel safe committing like a Thunderhammer unit until the Helverin was removed. Now, important note, the Helverin does not apply that debuff in Overwatch. So an Ingress unit has play, but you cannot, if you bring an Ingress unit in sight of a Helverin, you're in trouble. Because I will spin that shooting because that -1 to hit in combat will heavily, heavily harm a unit that's already hit on 4s. Cool. I'm going to take away a whole third of your hits. I'm good with that.
Yeah. So you're saying when they drop a combat unit in within range to Overwatch, you would Overwatch?
No. If they ingressed in my turn, I always made sure that the Helverin would have line of sight into kind of the ingress spots and say,
gotcha.
Because they would go, oh, that's fine. I'll totally risk the damage. It's AP1, right? I'll go, oh, yeah, it's AP1. But also you're going to take a -1 to hit in combat, which is what that unit is there for.
Yeah, gotcha. Jind is expressing frustration about the points values in the book and just saying it's very hard to build a list. I honestly haven't quite had the same frustration as Jind when it comes to list building. He feels like he's got too many points left over or not enough points. Yeah, I'd like another.
There are definitely moments I do that in list building. I don't miss the days of being able to like add or remove a Meltagun for 5 points. I do miss that sometimes. For just the ability to feel that I could customize my list and have the agency to get an enhancement if I wanted. That said, it's the world we live in. Long live Imperial agents, I guess.
Yeah. The only thing, and we can't change anything, so there's no point wish listing, but the only thing I do miss is that Helverins and Warglaives were 10 points difference in price. So if you were 10 points over, you could drop one for the other, or vice versa. You know what I mean?
I agree. And I think the Boy Racks maybe needs to be that point, because I think it's silly that it's 10 points more than either of the other two, because its data sheet ability is garbage.
Yeah. Did you use the detachment rule regularly enough to make it worthwhile using Valourstrike over any of the other options? I feel like we've covered that off.
Hands
Do you
down.
feel like
Hands down.
Yeah. More or less likely to take the move. Oh, so yeah, the deeds and qualities, you've kind of already covered this, but in terms of the you're always taking the reroll rather than the movement, even though with Valourstrike the extra movement,
even though the movement and the bonus to advance sounds so nice.
Yeah.
I took, other than the Crusader, which possesses quantity of shooting, I took quality, and not having the rerolls like hurt. When you roll one shot on the Volcano Lance and then you don't have a hit reroll for the 2 you're going to immediately roll to hit, it feels terrible.
Yeah.
So I just saved myself the 5 CP.
Daniel wants to know, can you confirm the rumors that your dulcet tones and symmetrical features are all natural?
Truly. No performance enhancing drugs here. Just middle-aged dad bod.
Questions about dealing with melee pressure lists. I feel like we've done a reasonably good job of covering that off. There's been a little bit of talk about Space Wolves and Blood Angels and reactive moves and the ability to use a Crusader to, Thunderstomp is a thing now. You get to fight with your Crusader. So that's all great stuff. The basic game plan, Jake, we've covered off as well. Would WTC terrain change your choice of detachment or units?
Potentially. WTC is always interesting. Now, if we're playing by pure WTC and there's no Dawn of War, it likely probably keeps it relatively the same. WTC terrain, at least in the most recent iteration, does have multiple layouts that even an Armiger gets stuck. But a Big Knight now with the ability to walk through walls, I find is actually more valuable, because Armigers can get trapped, Big Knights cannot. But I think WTC could cut down on how much I value the Castellan, but even then, it's not necessarily the range I was valuing. It truly was the AP, and that advanced move and being able to get the line of sight was more important necessarily than like the 72-inch range of saying, cool, even if you go to the next table, I'll shoot you. So yeah, I think I would at least run this iteration multiple times on WTC. But I do openly recognize like there's a definite change in game plan that has to happen there.
Right. Gotcha. And that's it for the questions. We've got through them. There are a couple more, but they very much deal with stuff that we've already attacked. Brian, thank you so much for taking the time, man. I always appreciate your insight and your knowledge.
Thanks for having me.
And congratulations on the run at LVO. Best overall is amazing.
It's what I strive for, because I know that I can't bet on beating Nick or John consistently. So being able to say, hey, I had fun and hobbied my guys to tell their story, and I'm going to go for best overall, always feels great. So it was definitely nice to add a trophy up there. It was a surprise, but I had such a great time. And that's, I think, the thing I would tell everybody the most. If I was going to give it any parting thought, it would be the Knight Codex is fun. There are 4 totally different detachments. I loved getting to play with something that wasn't just a stat check for my opponent, because sometimes we all know, like with the index, the feel no pain would just sometimes feel terrible. Just like T12, like, whatever, deal with it. I felt like every game was a lot of fun. I played 7 phenomenal opponents. I was exhausted by the end of it, but had an absolutely phenomenal time. So dust them off. If you're just thinking like, I don't know, pick a detachment, go and have fun. All 5. Somebody go win a tournament with Questor's Forge Pack and convince me. Then I'll take it and say you proved yourself right. I'll take it and play with it. But yeah, I just think it's a wonderful time to be playing. I think the meta is quite balanced. Yes, Eldar are rough, but we have game into a lot of the top predators, and giving us reactive move flips the table on a lot of them. So
yeah, that's so good. Well, listen, I appreciate your time. And folks, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate your time as well in downloading, streaming, watching on YouTube, wherever you get the episode. It's great that you have. Now, because this is the first time I've tried this, I'm going to try and take us out with the newly produced intro/outro. If that doesn't work, never mind. This will just be the end of it.
it'll just
Brian,
be a
we'll
cold
catch you next
cut.
time. It'll just be a cold cut out, and we'll see you later, folks. This has been 40K by Night. I'm Steve Joel. For Brian Jones and Reese and Stig and Rutnu and the other people on the team, thanks again, and take care. We'll see you next time. And we're done.
I love it. I love the video outro.